Hello everyone, I'm Taka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much. So hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. So today is a conversation that's very close to my heart, and it's close to my heart for two reasons. One, we're talking about something that I'm very passionate about, which is women's leadership. And it's something Busara has worked on a lot. We've been looking at the barriers for women exercising their full rights to leadership. We've looked at the impact of women's leadership in many different spaces. So it's something I feel very excited about and can talk about forever. But there is that. And then the second reason is we're talking about women's leadership in the law. Now, as a former lawyer, or sometimes I call myself a recovering lawyer, the law is still a space that's very close to my heart. So it's exciting to be talking about women's leadership, but particularly in the legal space. And to do that, I'm in conversation with one of Ghana and the UK's preeminent lawyers, Korieh Duodu, who's also a dear friend, I'm going to confess as well. So Korieh is the head of Egality Law, which is a law firm based in Accra and the UK, and it might be the only dual registered Ghanaian and British law firm. So Korieh studied law in the UK and qualified as a barrister in 2000. He worked in a number of international law firms in the UK and practiced as a specialist in media and intellectual property law. And he appeared in a number of leading media and privacy cases in the UK, including Naomi Campbell's well-known privacy litigation, woo, yay, and a number of cases involving key principles in the law of defamation in the UK. He then chose, after 15 years as a UK qualified lawyer, and I think this is what makes Korieh so special, to come to Ghana to give his skills, his expertise to people in Ghana, to clients in Ghana, and requalify as a Ghanaian practitioner as well. So since qualifying, Korieh has set up Egality Law, which is a full-service corporate and commercial law firm servicing multinational and local clients. And Korieh has said that his dream was to create a law firm that was focused on assisting companies and individuals acting in the public interest and seeking to enhance governance and other standards in Ghanaian life. So I think Korieh really exemplifies the lawyers who are using the law to strengthen governance and just to amplify what needs to happen on this continent. So we celebrate you in that respect, Korieh. So
thank you so much, Taka.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Before I delve into the questions to you, I think it's important that I let our listeners and our viewers know why I have called this episode, we've named it, The Accidental Feminist. So it really came from visiting Korieh's law firm and looking around, and I noticed something. I've been in a lot of law firms. Again, I started my journey in the law, practiced a couple of years, but there was something very interesting about Korieh's law firm. I looked around and I said, they're just women here. It is primarily Well, yes, of course, there were some guys, but it was primarily women. And then it started to resonate with a couple of things I have heard Korieh talk about when we're in conversations. And, again, as leaders do, we talk about the struggles with getting the right people, the right fit. And Korieh was always like, that's why I always hire women. I can count on women. And I thought, oh, wow, that is very different from what I've heard in many male-dominated spaces, where people are like, oh, I would love to hire women, but they're complicated. They're so emotional. Or before you know it, there's the whole, what they call the maternity tax. Before you know it, you hire them, they're young, they're pregnant, and all of that. And so it almost seems for many leaders, if they're being honest, they will talk about it as a burden. Having to hire more women. But what was really interesting about Korieh is I could see he was seeing women as an asset. And I thought, this is a man who may not be wearing the T-shirts that I do, which I'm like, I am a feminist, no ifs, buts, or whats. But clearly, he was acting on clear feminist principles and really literally dismantling the barriers of patriarchy that keep women from leadership roles. So I thought, no. We've got to bring him on the podcast and learn a little bit more about his ethos, his mindset, so he can serve as an example to many other leaders, men, but also women, who constantly they don't see the value of having women in these key roles, and particularly rising into leadership roles. So, Korieh, that is why we have dubbed you the accidental feminist.
Amazing title. Really
we'll get you a T-shirt for it.
I want one. Excellent. Yes.
Hey.
We need to put it on our websites as well. The accidental feminists, equality law. I think we should.
I love that. So, Korieh, maybe my first question to you, therefore, is what motivated you to prioritize hiring women in your law firm?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taka. And it's such a pleasure to join your podcast. I've been watching it for ages and it's so informative and inspiring. So this is absolutely amazing to be considered worthy of joining you for this really important conversation. Yeah, well, look, it's for me, I guess the first point is we make a priority to be successful as a law practice. We want to be the best at what we do. My whole career, I've been in a very competitive industry, which is commercial law, media law, intellectual property, working at some of the top firms. And to make those firms successful, you've got to have really dedicated ideas around how to calibrate and, design the firm for success. And hiring women, for me, is proof of concept. It's as simple as that. Because in every stage of performance, from job interview for the most junior role, right up until senior partner of 1,000 headcount lawyer firm, I've seen outstanding examples of leadership, dedication, focus, contribution to the business and, to what we're trying to do as lawyers from women. Not just women, of course, amazing men along the way. But honestly speaking, if I look at the crude numbers, the number of women who have been, so much at ease in the environment of a successful law firm and capable of hitting the boundaries and pushing upwards and upwards, frankly, outnumbers the men. And I've seen that throughout my career. Two of my very earliest influences as lawyers were senior partners or heads of department at big, competitive, male-dominated firms in the UK. I remember one partner who was the head of the litigation team, and she had a team of, 20 big-hitting, high-earning male partners who she had to lead up. And she rolled up her sleeves and she turned them into one of the top UK litigation departments. And that's proof of concept. The senior partner of another firm, had been the head of intellectual property and went on to be senior partner, and just had this gravitas, an ability to inspire other leaders in the firm effortlessly. And when I pulled her aside one day and I said, how do you do this? And she said, well, it's very little different to making sure my children eat their breakfast at the dining table before school. And I thought, wow, there you go. And bringing in that sort of those feminine qualities, those familiar leadership instincts, for me is absolutely critical to the success of any organization. And it's not like we literally prioritize women. We have a fiercely, as you'll imagine, we have a fiercely, as you'll appreciate, a fiercely equal opportunities approach to recruitment in our firm. But the numbers speak for themselves, and those who get through and perform best in interview and perform best as pupils or paralegals and trainees and get promoted and end up in leadership positions in our firm tend to be women in this environment, which is absolutely fascinating.
It's so fascinating, Korieh, and I want to unpack that a little bit because there's a couple of things you've said that I really want to lift up. Huh? One is that I think you very cogently make the case that recruiting, promoting, and investing in women is good for business. This is not just it's just good for business. And this is a case we've been making for a long time in the women's leadership space. We've been saying women deserve to be in these spaces as a right in of themselves. But number two, it is also good for business. And I love what you said, proof of concept, the numbers just show. So I think you make that so clearly. But the second is that even in your equal opportunity way of hiring, promoting, where you're simply looking for the best, women are showing up as the best. That in turn allows you to succeed as a company. But I wonder, Korieh, whether, because many companies are not finding this, because otherwise we would see a lot more women in these spaces. I wonder if you are defining the excellence that you are looking for in a lawyer when you're recruiting and when you're promoting in a way that enables women to shine.
That's a brilliant comment. Yes. I think that's really interesting and important to recognize. It's actually, how do you define success, right? And if you just look at numbers, you'll get a very different picture to if you look at the happiness of an organization, the experience of its clients, not just in getting the right result, but what kind of an experience did they have as clients, in the feel of the organization, and in how it contributes positively to what it is we're trying to do. And what you make me think about and remember, because I haven't really, analyzed this in the way you brilliantly do, but what you make me think about is that law is actually very combative. Even if, so even if you are in corporate, commercial, non-contentious practice, you don't go to court every day. Very often you're still in very hard negotiations over documents. You're trying to resolve disputes. You're with someone on the other side negotiating, trying to win the best deal for your client. It's still combative. And of course, if you do go to court, we do go to court to some extent. We do some litigation. It's extremely adversarial. And there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence. There's a certain amount of, let's say, lack of ego as well, which comes with the feminine. I don't have it. And, even on a very personal level, Taka, it helps to balance me out, to have a really, emotionally intelligent, well-rounded, grounded female colleague to work with in some of those really combative spaces. So
I love it.
Again, it's it's not about, all women at the expense of men, of course not.
No, no,
But
no.
what do we bring to the party when we come together and work as a team and bring the strengths of both the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine? That's really, for me, that's where the good juice is.
It's so interesting because it's something I hadn't even thought about before, particularly in the context of the law. Because what I hear you saying is that in these sectors, industries that are so combative, the level of emotional intelligence you helps nuance that, navigate that for the interests of your client. And women, again, because the way we've been socialized, it's not always inherent, but the way we've been socialized, at least I found in my experience, many women have been forced to hone their emotional intelligence skills, whether they like it or not. But what I'm hearing you say that becomes something they bring to the table.
Exactly.
The whole thing about the ego. I mean, I know for many men, your sense of worthiness, the way you show up, has to be a lot around, I mean, what is a lot of testosterone, a lot of aggressiveness can show success. Yes. Again, particularly in a combative area, whereas more vulnerability, nuance may not be valued. And that gives women an advantage in terms of they don't have that limit. Yes, women, we can have our egos, but we learn how to manage it many times we're forced to learn how to manage it because of the world in which we live in. And so that becomes something that's valuable in the work that you're doing. And I love what you put it, and particularly, ultimately, for your client's experience in terms of the service that you offer.
Hugely important. Exactly. And so it's like, let's give an example. A client is involved in a really tough negotiation and they really can't back down on a certain issue. And we need them to win on that issue because it's maybe business critical. Now, with one type of personality, they can win and they can crush that counterparty and leave them feeling like they've had a really terrible experience. And they might win on that contract, but they might not get another contract after that because the relationship is destroyed. Now, the other way that could play out is that everyone is seen as a winner. There isn't a sort of over-domineering ego that comes out as the victor. Everyone is brought along as to why this is really important for all of us. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not the best at delivering that message of, hey, let's all win out of this situation. I'm a litigator. I used to fight in courts all the time. And the instincts come out, the testosterone, the aggression comes out, and that's not necessarily for the long-term good of that relationship because we're ultimately talking about relationships between people. So what very often female lawyers bring, and you can't generalize, some of them can be just as aggressive or more aggressive than men.
Sure, yes.
But they really do understand how to actually manage egos, like you said. It's not just about not bringing so much of your own ego to the table, but when you've grown up with a requirement to learn how to manage egos, you've got a domineering father figure or equivalent, and you learn how to you learn how to negotiate that. That is an incredible skill set to bring to the negotiating table in the commercial world. So all of it plays in.
Korieh, we have to start capturing this and writing this down, by the way, because this is so interesting. I really, even in my work in women's leadership, it's interesting to hear that articulation of the kinds of skill set that women bring to some of these spaces in such concrete terms. And again, and I like what you said, and you emphasize, this is not to generalize, not all women are the same, but I think it makes the case for the value of, and I think we already have the data to show more diverse companies and organizations succeed better because people bring different sets of skill sets, capacities, competence. And I think you've really clearly made the case for what women bring to the table, at least in your context. So really amazing. So then I will ask you, so you brought them to the table. what are some of the things but I think you said it. I was going to share any success stories, examples where the presence of women in your firm led to a more positive outcomes. And I think you've given me one, an example of how it can work. But I wonder if you have any story to share again around
Yeah,
how one of the presence of women in your law firm really helped you and the team.
absolutely. And I think the first and most striking one that comes to mind is a story from quite a few years ago when we really were very early in the story of this firm, and we were only in 2 rooms in Osu, and we had a young paralegal who we recruited who was very smart and clearly very capable, without much experience at all. But she used to come into work and do a great job. And then one day I noticed when she came in, I could smell that she had been cooking or she'd been in a kitchen environment. And, I had to make a comment about this because it's my job to give her feedback, help her grow. And I said, hey, and I won't say her name, but, um, do you notice that your suit smells of cooking? Why is that? It's something you've got to think about how you can do something about that. And she sat me down and told me what she does in the mornings before she comes to work. And she gets to work really early. She has to make a full meal for the household. She lives, sorry, in a house with her mum and dad, who are not very well paid civil servants, government workers. They live in 2 rooms. And her job, because both parents go out to work, is to cook a whole meal and iron both her parents' uniforms before she puts on hers and comes to work. And that's just what she has to do. And this is like a whole 3, 4 hour process before she even gets to the office. And
Yes.
my goodness, I just held up my hands and thought, wow, that is what young women up and down the country are faced with, as well as the, heavy burdens they're carrying in their jobs, in their studies. Now, what capacity of person does it take to be able to do that? Put a smile on your face and come to work,
Wow.
So it wasn't about the cooking smell in the clothes. It was about that gave me an insight into what she was doing.
Oh,
And she was
wow.
so quick to realize that, this was a blind spot for her. It just hadn't occurred to her. Never one day subsequently did she ever come in and that was an issue at all. She fixed it with, instantly. It was never an issue at all from
Oh,
then. She just hadn't
wow.
noticed. But what a little insight into her morning
Yeah.
routine, and then she would get back in the evening and she'd have to do more work. Sometimes she'd be working late as well. So you'd see that she'd be offline for a couple of hours, basically helping out again as, an assistant mum in the household. And then she'd
Yeah.
get back on her computer and start working until 9, 10, 11 at night. Then she's up at 4 o'clock in the morning to help mum with these tasks. Wow. And as men, it doesn't
Yes.
occur to us, actually. For most of us, we don't have these
Yes. Second
additional
jobs.
second jobs. Maybe we do have second jobs, but they're not like those
Yes.
ones. We're not
Yes.
cutting onions and
Yes.
peppers and frying them
Yes.
before
Yes. And
we get off to
cleaning
work
and
in the morning.
this is
Exactly.
and thank you for this example, Korieh, because I think it brings me so nicely to what is it there for? And I'm so glad she was able to give you that insight into the reality of many women that their office job is usually the second job, actually, because the first job
Absolutely.
is the family. Whether it's
Yes.
immediate, extended, whatever, it's caregiving. We're socialized to do it. And I've seen so many women, I don't care how senior you get, there is an expectation, particularly
Yes.
as African women, there's an expectation that you still never give up the first job that's
Yes.
associated with your gender. And you can only delegate it so much. But
Yes.
as men, so it's as if we've moved into the workplace, but we've never left the first job. So we carry these two huge responsibilities. And what I have found often gets in the way of women's progression, career-wise, is that the demands of the professional job can be so high that it starts to impact these other responsibilities. And so unless an employer is able to provide, is sensitive to that, then usually you start to see what they call the leaky pipeline. They just start to drop off. So maybe it brings me, so what you all have done as a company, as Egality Law, with that understanding, what has that meant for the kinds of culture, policies, and practices you have at Egality Law that respond to the reality of the women who work in the firm?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, that's really important. And it's something that's ever evolving for our firm because we're learning all the time ourselves about this.
Hi, folks. Hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the Africa Leaders Circle, our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show.
And I think the first point to make is that it leads to us having a very flat organizational structure. Because I want to hear the opinion of this young woman who spends 2 or 3 hours doing other jobs, very, very important jobs in her life before she comes into the office, because her opinion counts. She is a champion of our society. And I must give and validate and promote her opinion and her input. Even if he's a very junior member of our practice, her opinion really does count. And I wouldn't have, if not for that coincidental incident with, wanting to give feedback about the smell of clothes, I'd never have had that insight from her. And it taught me so much about how to deal with my colleagues, some of the challenges they face, but also some of the strengths that they can also bring to the table. So really having a flat structure and encouraging freedom of speech, basically, within the workplace, within the leadership, inclusiveness, not just in the letter, but in the actual execution of what we do is really, really the starting point. I think secondly, it's about being very open and understanding about what the wider commitments and responsibilities of women are, and making sure that your workplace does have policies that accommodate maternity effectively, that accommodate the needs that women may have to fulfill the obligations they may have to fulfill in the family, in the household, or otherwise in life, which just have to be done sometimes during the working day.
Okay.
And that then leads to something which is very fundamental to us, which is we have a flexible working policy, but it's really, truly flexible. And working from home, even before COVID, was entirely natural to us. And either coming in early or coming in late because you have to deal with other responsibilities is really key. And if you can accommodate that, I think that helps to enhance family life at home. And that can take a lot of stress off people, Because if you have these commitments and responsibilities, and then you're rushing because there's someone clock watching it that you better be through the door at 8:30, that's not going to achieve much. That's going to just lead to a really bad start to the day, frankly.
Yes, yes.
So, how do we bring these policies to life and make them actually meaningful in the workplace? But, I think the other side of it is that when you do employ lots more women, and you get a real insight and you hear women talking frankly about some of the experiences they face in the workplace, the misogyny, the harassment, etc., it makes you realize that some of these policies aren't strong enough, frankly. A policy like discrimination or sexual harassment, actually a lot of companies in Ghana, we advise companies on these policies all the time. A lot of companies in Ghana don't have policies that deal with sexual harassment. They just have policies that deal with harassment. And sexual harassment is a really serious thing that men hardly ever experience, if at all, and don't really understand. And I must admit, up until not too long ago, I didn't really deeply understand what this issue is. Because frankly, I've never been undressed by someone's eyes when I walked in to the workplace in the morning. I've never experienced that. And I may never experience that. No matter how smart my suits are, or whether they're from Savile Row, I'm probably never going to go through that. What does that do to you? How can you perform, in a very serious, high octane environment when someone just undressed you with their eyes or with the words that they used? And what may seem like light-hearted banter and kidding around can be very, very harmful. And when you see and you hear from women who've had these experiences, it leads you to want to enhance and deepen those types of policy as well. So I think, the interesting cases, especially in the UK now, of types of harassment, which are so indirect and so sort of counterintuitive. So there's one case of a judge who has been reprimanded for telling too many stories about his personal life to one of his assistants. Now, a lot of people might say, "Oh, come on, this is wokeism. This is oversensitivity to such issues." But what the assistant has said is, this person is in a position of great power and seniority, and decides to sit back, put up his, kickback, and spend 30 minutes telling me stories about what he's gone through with his partner, or a dinner he had when he went on a date, or whatever. Not sort of terrible, gory stories of any sort, but she has to sit through that. And it leaves her feeling uncomfortable. And that is something that he's taking advantage of with her, because he's in a position of power. He's a male, and he feels there's something charming and entertaining to this female, this younger female, of telling her all these stories from his personal life. Now, in a lot of workplaces, that may not be considered harassment at all. That would be considered entirely normal. But is it? And if you're making someone feel uncomfortable, you have to take that into account. And even if they are someone who may have a particular sensitivity, you've got to think about who you're talking to and who you're dealing with. And these things are very, very important, and they're not always obvious. So I think it's a real challenge trying to formulate policies which allow the workplace to get on and work, but also allow for genuine inclusiveness. And very often in our society, I don't think we always give these issues as much thought as we should.
Oh, I love this. I love this. There's two things, you can see my excitement. There's two things I want to pick up. One is to lift up what you said in terms of what equality law is doing. And I think even from a leadership perspective, I think there's lots of learning there. One, you talked about having a flat organizational structure. Yeah. But what I was really hearing that as a leader, you're constantly in listening mode. So even if there's a hierarchy, you're constantly listening to the opinions and the experience of women at all levels. Even particularly, what you don't want to be cut out from is the experience of those who might be more junior. So that
Precisely.
right from that paralegal, that day, you want to make sure your ear is to the ground in terms of appreciating their experience. That's the first I heard you
Exactly.
say. But then what's fantastic then is you have taken that listening into the second thing, which are the policies and practices. And you gave two examples. One, it's
Yes.
really effective maternity leave. But the second is this issue of flexibility. And I think for so many women, again, as you said, because of the demands, our gender roles and the demands, flexibility then becomes a huge advantage that enables us to juggle the two. So I really like those two
Precisely.
aspects. But then you led us to this idea of it's okay to have the policies in place, but what you've seen, and I guess what you guys have worked out, it's meaning you have to really put them in practice, which you're seeing that for many companies is tick boxing, even if they have a sexual harassment, and you're right,
Yes.
very few do. It becomes, and I know sexual harassment, particularly on this continent, is still a huge issue, let alone the guy putting his feet up and talking about personal life. These ones, there is no innuendos. It's just direct, obvious, undressing with the eye, saying
Absolutely.
walk, that you're spot on. That is the reality and the barrier that
Yes.
many women face to really having
Yes.
an equitable experience and being able to move up in these companies. So my question to you, therefore, and forgive me, but I'm going to ask you this as a man, as a
Yeah.
successful lawyer who, in our status conscious African societies, and you've been around the continent quite a bit, how do you make the case to your colleagues that, and if we focused on sexual harassment, I mean, just the way you articulate it means this is a no-brainer for you, but how do you make the case? How do you influence change within them so that they too recognize that this is a no-brainer, this is just a no-go, you just don't do this?
Brilliant. Absolutely. I think the key starting point is to have genuine gender balance at all levels of the organization. Because you don't want to hear it from me. You want to have a deeper and more organic understanding of your female colleagues. So if you are an organization which may be all male or predominantly male, bringing female energy into your organization or into your leadership as a starting point will be an immensely helpful, gateway to build understanding about these issues. I mean, that almost goes, I'm sure, without saying.
Yeah.
I think secondly is about trying to bring to life examples of how these issues play out. And that's why, when you develop policies and, ethos and the ways in which an organization should be running, that's great. But you've got to actually play out scenarios. And that's where training and facilitation of discussion, so that it's not just on the paper in theory, it's lived and understood in our day-to-day experience. Because actually, someone may simply not realize that a certain behavior that they've been doing for many, many years is somewhat inappropriate.
Inappropriate. Yes.
Yeah. But when you play it out and you show other people's perspectives and you work with examples, you can make them lighthearted. You can make it into a training session, which is not particularly, onerous or intense. But you can bring out some of these issues and let people debate them. And very often, like on the example of the lawyers kicking back and telling stories to a junior colleague, there'll be different views on that. And that's great. You can have a debate about these issues. Is that really where we want to draw the line? Are we being too extreme? Let's have a discussion about that. Let's work out where we want to find a balance in our organization. What really reflects our ethos? What's relevant to us? What's a priority for us? And I think that's really key. What does it mean to a woman to have to come back from maternity leave after 3 months or else there's going to be some consequence to whatever it's promotion or, getting in on a particular project or whatever it might be. If you're under pressure to get back to work, what does that mean at home? What if your colleagues are young leaders who've never had children themselves, and don't know what it's like to deal with a 4-month-old child who's still up all night? And you're having to be at work at 8:30 the following morning, looking smart, and in the right mood, and all these
and
things.
energetic. But it's so
let's
interesting,
live
Korieh,
out these policies and examples.
As much, even just listening to you, giving these concrete examples, and I fully agree with you. I think the more we have inclusive spaces, the more we're having genuine dialogue, awareness raising around these kinds of things, the better. Fully agree with you. But just listening to you, I think there's something to be said about having a man to man, saying, my brother,
Right.
This thing there, you need to understand where these women are coming from. Because often as women, when we talk, you're like, you're being too extra, you're being too, and just having a man who has clearly, a leader who has taken time to appreciate what women face and can articulate it so well. I think there is a role for you to be, for men to have for conversation with other men around this. And I wonder, what about, as a lawyer, what is the role around accountability on this? Because for some, they know it. But I think for some of these issues, it's so hard to. So where are you seeing, and maybe that would be my last question to you, not just around sexual harassment, but around, if I think of the legal sector, and I think around having more women leadership roles, having a lot more inclusive, not just law firms, but also the judiciary, law society. Where are you seeing the shifts, and what kind of accountability can there be on that to say, you guys said you would do this, but nothing is shifting or things are shifting?
Brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess to think about the first part of your question, which is accountability. Let's look at accountability in the workplace first of all.
Yes.
First of all, I think, there are a lot more men who are really taking these issues seriously. And in the legal profession, amongst lawyers, we've had some horror stories recently, like people getting pregnant during pupillage and having a really terrible experience as a result, or losing the pupillage, or very, very senior leaders being involved in, public clashes with young lawyers who claim they've had a relationship with them, and it all spills out in very misogynistic ways in the media. There've been a lot of examples recently where men need to realize, and have realized, that, look, this is something we have to take seriously. And I see more and more inclusive and gender balanced firms, partnerships, leaderships. There are a lot of women-led law firms in Ghana, which is, let's celebrate that. It's, we're not at a standing start. We're actually quite a far way down the line. But how do you make it accountable? And for me, one of the key requirements is that we must, as leaders, be willing to be appraised ourselves by our colleagues. And, the old sort of cliche or fairly old-fashioned term, 360 appraisals.
Yes.
Let's actually do that genuinely. I want to sit down with a colleague who I'm looking at over 3 or 6 months and saying, this is how you've performed. And I need to be ready to listen to how I've performed to them. And I need to also give them a channel, not just to tell me, they might not be able to confront me on these issues, but there's someone in the firm that they can talk to freely, and, express any of these concerns or feedback or ways in which we can improve as men. We're not always the most approachable species, the male leader. And let's understand that and work with that. And let's let's help the organization to make us accountable. If I sit down next to a colleague and say, well, do I treat you properly? That young colleague might just say, oh, yes, sir, it's absolutely fine. But be honest, if they go and talk to someone who they trust, who has influence and who I'll listen to in whether it's HR or in management or another partner who can hold me to account and who they feel comfortable speaking to. Absolutely critical, I think.
Love that.
And then I think more broadly, within the legal profession and the leadership of the legal profession, again, let's celebrate. We have a female Chief Justice, the second one.
That is true.
And our Chief Justice is a fantastic leader, actually, and is highly conscious of these issues and a great role model and inspiration for lots and lots of women leaders and for equality and gender balance in these issues. We have, as I say, a lot of female leaders in the profession. And I think that as a result, we have a lot of female judges as well. My auntie is a retired judge from many, many years ago. And we've got judges at all levels of the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, District Courts, magistrates. There's a huge female presence. And that is to be celebrated in Ghana. Actually, I think Ghana is quite far ahead.
Yes, by the way,
on that.
Yes, indeed. We celebrate that about Ghana. You're right.
Yeah, and that then leads to, a richer discussion on these issues.
Love that.
And the ability to look up to women is a means of instantly rewiring men who may otherwise be misogynistic. A young male lawyer who can see a female Chief Justice or goes before a female on the bench to make his case is already being rewired. And I'm sure that's what happened to me when I had those women leaders in my old firm. And I had to, work for them and I had to answer to them. And I very quickly began to celebrate that. So those would be my views on, how we're enhancing this and we're actually doing very well in Ghana.
Nice. And what I like is that I really want to lift up this point about accountability as leaders and getting that feedback and creating a structure, a framework to get that feedback so that you're held accountable by your team and the quality of your leadership. I think that is fundamental to help us grow as leaders for sure. Huh?
Yes, exactly. A performance loop, I guess you'd call it in HR speak or in how to develop, monitor, and evaluate an organization. Yes.
Korieh, as we end this conversation, I don't think I want to call you the accidental feminist. I think I want to call you the true feminist who is just doing amazing work in terms of the inclusive leadership, in terms of your articulation of the issues, but more importantly, in living it as you develop and grow the women in your firm. And just the way you show up. So thank you for being you. I'm proud to call you my brother. Thank you, Korieh.
I'm so delighted to join you on this wonderful conversation, Taka. It's a real privilege and you're doing incredible work and I'm celebrating you as one of my female champions.
Thank you, Korieh. So listeners, viewers, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a comment so that you don't miss any subsequent episodes. See you for the next one. Ciao.
Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I learned a lot and I hope you did too. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other amazing leaders. See you soon. Ciao.